Thank you. Yes, a round of applause to the presenters. I guess this is quite important, what's unfolding here, especially in relation to the conversations that that took place yesterday, where a major point of departure was unlearning these institutionalized ideas of what our creative practice is out there in the real world. And I am picking up from both presentations that you, the panelists are both in their respective works grappling with these ideas of making these methods and these tools that you walk out of these institutions with really speak to the positions in which you find yourselves as practitioners wanting to practice, wanting to exist, and realizing that there's some sort of like a disjuncture between what is what you're walking away with from institutions as the tools to use and what is actually applicable to the real world. So I'd like you guys to maybe engage a little more on this unlearning, because it was quite and really speak specifically to the disappointments maybe of some of these tools and the reality of what, how applicable are some of these things, and what have you had to drop along the way? What have you had to really completely do a reassessment of your understanding of this mechanism? I think you guys are already doing it, but maybe just speak more specifically and focused.
And yeah, I'm like, yes, unlearning. Hey, that word has been used so many times sometimes. I wonder, well, one of the things I personally had to drop in terms of unlearning in a space is me being and having all the knowledge. This also goes hand in hand with spaces. Sometimes there's something about spaces that are so fixed, that are so proper, and in its properness become problematic, that one starts to unbreak. So an example would be, I'm also part of a, not all black, but a collective, where we started to question the notion of conference and these structured chairs that are looking at us, and we're here and you guys are there and we know it, you guys don't, you know what that means, and the frustration that comes with it, yet we have to provide the information, yet we want to engage. So we completely tore the stage apart and invited the participants on the stage to build these boxes with us that speak to scaffolding as educational method. What does it mean? We're building together, we're learning together, doing stuff together. So I think for me, I hope I'm answering right, but yeah. Your turn.
Okay. I think insidious and like implicit ways very much make the environment competitive. But they also like encourage this idea of like, you're gonna be great, and the subtext is better than everyone else. And one of the things, and it's not an unlearning, because I don't believe that you can produce and make work and be successful, so to speak, on your own. There are people who build you up, people who support you, but it shouldn't be that you're the person being given everything and you're not giving anything back. And I think that it's about learning to use the resources around you. And that is not running to a gallery space or more established space to be like, I need this and that, because they're just like, no, you're cool enough right now, maybe wait a few years. Whereas if you speak to and connect with the people who are in the same class with you, a year above, a year below, you could actually, that already is a network. That's a connection, and that's power. That's power, and you use that to for yourselves. I mean, one of the the most, I think, successful examples would be DJI Studios. And they started as two individuals in undergrad. And then eventually, over the years, it graduated, etc. And now they have a studio house. And obviously, there's some financial and practical challenges, but they have a studio house that they use for their own work, but they also are very open and inviting to other people. You don't have to necessarily like pay them to print with them and to work with them. They're very much open to a mutual exchange that is not monetary, and that is a necessity, and we forget that. Or it's like, I don't know, brainwashed out of us. Yeah.
Perhaps I'd like to, at this point, open it up to the floor for questions. Are there any questions okay, so we have one mic. So I'm gonna do a whole like cross-country number here, or somebody could. So we'll take the 3 questions in the order.
Hello, my name is Kwezi Kule, and if I may make a small request, I'm part of the Black Mark, which are the co-organizers of the event, and if I may make a small request, the people who are in the audience, and if they want to ask questions, could you please just for reference say your name first before you make a comment or ask a question. So now I'm going to go to my question or comment. I'm always a bit ambivalent about this issue of language, and I understand why it's important, but I'm also a bit sometimes pessimistic about it. And the reason is, some time ago, somebody wanted to do an exhibition on photography, and they had said that they wanted to write the press release in isiZulu. So I said, no, that's great, you must do it. And the first obstacle that we came across is, how do you translate the word photography? You could possibly translate the word photographer, but what about photography? Because it's not really so much a thing, or it's more of a concept. And that made me realize that what you are actually engaged with when you're doing translation, or even trying to find indigenous words for the things that we do, is not only to communicate the sense of what you're trying to say, but also all of the history that is embedded in some of these words, which much of it, actually, it's not exclusively, of course, but much of it is based on the history of the Western canon of these disciplines. So, in a way, it is about the issue around language is not so much about just merely finding Zulu alternatives to the words themselves. It is about how do you really own the whole of that history that you have inherited, whether we like it or not, through coercive means, which we were taught in, and it's sometimes we romanticize this kind of decolonial way of thinking, but without actually thinking about the nuts and bolts of really how this comes about. Okay. So that's just my comment.
My name is Trevor, and I think it's directed to both Puleng and Tatenda. So, listening to your presentations, I had a lot about collaboration, and my question is, how did funding or the capital, the finance aspect shape the nature of collaborations that you've worked on? And where is the finance, where the finance is coming from? Has it changed how or influenced or transformed each project you have collaborated on? Or that's irregardless, all collaborations you're working on currently or have worked on have all been the same regardless of the nature of financing and funding? So to what role does financing and funding impact collaborations?
No, three questions. The third question, please, and then we'll respond.
Hi, I'm Nosipo Bopela. I'm actually more in the live arts industry. I work as an entertainment technologist, and part of the work I do is a lot of interactive collaborations from visual arts based spaces to theatre-based spaces and live events. So my question is also, it's split in two, but it's the same question, but in different capacities. In that, when Puleng, when you speak about the transference of educating when a white person comes into a black environment to teach them to some degree on how to be black and how to represent themselves, how would you feel transference of education levels and activations of spaces that haven't been interacting with themselves and only actually come to a place where they respect something because it comes from a European space? How would you address that, and how would we overcome that? That particular project you spoke about, I know very well. I've worked closely with Neil Coppen and Vaughan Sadie, and one of the big frustrations was that they didn't want to have to babysit the project. They wanted to come in, deliver what they have, then walk away. How do they now deliver, but still allow and give them the space to own what it is they're delivering and the information they know from their capacity without sounding like the imperialists or the colonialists who are telling a black man how to be a black man? And my question to, Tatende, sorry, I nearly said Tandai, I don't know, I got Kolisa. But Tatende, my question to you is based around a project we're working on in Durban that's called Green Camp Art Gallery Space. It's an urban farming environment that's basically teaching people how to grow food out of a boot, literally, out of decayed, fallen apart spaces. They've moved it into a dilapidated building, and they are slowly making it a sustainable space, teaching people how to make the best of the environment around you. In that process, they then do oral-based work. They do art exhibitions out of that context. You make the best of what you have. We can't afford to be in the galleries. The galleries don't take us seriously enough. How would you feel they would be able to interact that into a social media space? Because I know that is one of the things they're struggling with, because the work is so physically based on people coming into the space, literally walking through the nooks and crevices and seeing all those little treasures in the weirdest places. How do they now attach themselves into a space that can touch someone in another city and then empower them to start a similar project in their environment? How would you advise them in that space, and how would you suggest that they don't lose the physical journey, don't lose the coordination and the collaborations that they work with, but at the same time be able to interact on an online system, on an online basis?
I'll start with the money question. Like I said before, we applied for funding twice. We got rejected, and we gave up after trying 2 times. But I think we were able to give up because we might not be trust fund babies, so to speak, but we come from slightly privileged backgrounds where we could, tap out of our own bank accounts to realize a project. So that was part of it. But I also think that in most of the collaborative projects, so to speak, that I've worked with, the money issue is always major. I worked on projects that were supported by, let's say, 1 or 2 lecturers while I was still in university. And even then it was sort of like a fight for somebody, and you had to have a lecturer, a professor, justifying why these students need to learn how to organize, let's say, because what the thing was, a student conference, a 2-day student conference, to justify why they need this money. There's a mediation to who deserves the money, part of the reasons why we gave up also on the idea of looking for funding was that we knew that they were looking for specific projects. And there's that idea of like funding these rural, and I'm using rural like that, these projects that are in the far off of like city central, or the urban, so to speak, because you don't necessarily have to keep that up after the fact of the project, because it's that far. Here you have to, when you support projects in proximity to you, you have to think about the fact that you're going to be assimilating and giving power to these individuals or these collectives, and to do that imbalances the general makeup of that scene. And I think that's part of it. I don't understand completely how the funding thing works. I sort of tend to stay away from the money things, gives me a headache. And so we just try to tap into our own resources or to exchange with others without actually using any actual money. When it comes to the other question in regards to the projects in Durban, what I don't have a solution for that, but something we're attempting to do with Rera Letsema as a platform is to be able to bring forward collectives like that and provide them with the platforms for visibility. So it's to say, okay, you don't have to do the online and stuff. We bring you forth on our platform and give you that because we have, to some degree, the resources to be able to do that. Not everyone is able to produce content online because it's not expensive, but it's not completely free either. Yeah, it's time consuming. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we're able to do the project was that Tshepo took some time off from work, and I was finished with a particular job, and I was in a space where I was doing other things to prepare for my future, so to speak, and I had the time to facilitate and to organize that project because you still have to pay bills at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start with Kwesi's statement, which I find so profound, and I didn't elaborate on it, and I'm so glad he did. Is that these the issues of language and the indigenous aspects of it. So, as we saw in the presentation, most of the Zulu words are not even circular words that we use in our everyday lives. For instance, to teach means ukufundisa, which is the word we have used for a very long time. So the reason why I really didn't use this word, because the definition of it means to school and to instruct. And that's definitely what I'm hoping not to do. So I again had to go back to the dictionary, which is what I like about what Tatena speaks about using internet as part of, as a research method. And then of course I found the word nkulumo mpendulwano, which again is still under scrutiny because maybe it's not nkulumo mpendulwano, maybe it's uxoxisana, you know? So it's constantly trying to find words, constantly being in conversation with myself and with others in terms of what is the exact words that are there, and I'm so glad Kwesi brought that up. So in terms of funding and the collaboration, so I run a non-profit organization, and it is funded by the Goethe Institute. Very German, yes. But I did not apply for a call. I came to them and I told them that you guys don't have an art educational program, and I'd really like to quit my job. I'd like to focus on art education as that's a passion of mine. You guys need it, I need your money, so how can you make it work? So the most important thing is them understanding what the art education program is about, and these programs that I run, they are dialogical, point number one. And as time goes by, they forget Uguti, that's the first point. So sometimes they can say to me, what's your lesson plan for this term? And I'm like, I don't know the lesson plan because the content derives from the learners. So I'll let you know after my conversation with them, and then I'll tell you what the program is about this term. So sometimes there are those issues of dragging, but so I mean we understand that this is what the project is about. I can't say the project is a music project and then you want a fine art project. They know the basis and the core of the project is that. Going into rural spaces, I'm a person who just loves to give back vele. So if there is ever an opportunity to go to the rural areas, I would go like running. So next month I'm going to Eastern Cape, Gangane, just to see if it's gonna work, and I maybe might also struggle with language barrier or whatever it is. But if there ever was such an opportunity, I've never applied for it yet. I also work with collaborations. I collaborate with the Bioscope if I need the kids to go watch a cinema before we talk. I collaborate with Visual Arts Museum. I collaborate with School of Arts in terms of if the learners need to do printmaking, they can go to the space. I collaborate with the Johannesburg Art Gallery if they need to print there. So there are a lot of collaborations. But these are the resources that exist, and how can we work together, such as them with Ukikelegetle. You know, so yes, we have a structure, financial structure, but if there are gaps in between, because we don't know how the program will go, which is what this pedagogy is about. They might just say, there was a time I bought a whole lot of materials because we are dealing with Musangumelo's works. And I thought, yeah, I know we're gonna do photography, and I know after that we're gonna do some printmaking, I know. And in the practice, I actually found they actually wanted to do some applied drama. So I had to go through a 3-month course to learn applied drama in order to facilitate it to my learners. So this is what it is, basically, the pedagogy that comes with it, the collaborations, and so forth. And the last one, so, yes, there's nothing, well, outside in Copen, the facilitation process, that's why in the beginning I said, I enjoyed how they didn't come there with a lesson plan. You know, they came into an empty space and they said, guys, this is what it is, how can we make it, and what do you think? And it went step by step by step, and eventually it was what it was. But we cannot, I think my frustration derived from the fact that Ungubezi was not even mentioned in the book. You know what I mean? I had to find him through a blog, and it was like, oh, by the way. And for me, that frustration, that's why I actually put him there, because he was the ideal facilitator, not only for the participants, but for them too, you know? So I feel like that could have been more prominent. I don't have a problem with the pedagogy at all, no. I just have, yeah, it was just those tensions that existed within me, Jeka. Yeah, well, yeah, that's about it.
Any more questions?
Any more questions?
Hello, my name is Puleng. Yeah, I was just trying to kind of formulate the question or the comment. I'm interested in the idea of like conflict, with the spaces that you're trying to kind of put together, and of course as a maybe part or an aspect of unlearning, you know, because you also try like all the time conceive collaborations as a more like fluid space. No antagonisms and things like this. And of course also dealing with kids, you deal with other issues, of course, you know. Maybe they're from unprivileged situations, some kids, you know, have, you know, these levels of, I don't know, inequality in the spaces that they come from. So how do you deal with these aspects in your ways of organizing somehow?
It's fine because we are running out of time. Yes.
I'm going to go my next 5 days. Tensions have always existed, Poti, and they always are there, and we cannot shy away from them at all. I know that in the facilitation process, I mean, I don't know how to answer your question. I mean, so in these tensions, I mean, the collaborations are always very important. Oh, I found how I'm going to answer your question. So I did a focus group discussion with learners, yeah? And in that focus group discussion, it was like, so what do you think about collaboration and how does it work? Because they're talking about dialogical and how they can't understand what that means, but they were explaining the collaborative aspect of it. So they did mention the tensions. I mean, I don't like collaborating because abanye bahleli phansi, they're not doing anything. Abanye, it takes longer in terms of the process because we have to negotiate spaces, we have to negotiate time, we have to negotiate a lot of things. So yeah, I guess that's what it is. Hey, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Maybe could you maybe elaborate on how are you within your program dealing with the circumstances some of these students are, the baggage of their circumstances that they come with into these programs, coming from all sorts of backgrounds, and when situations arise that are kind of quite a distinct display of those circumstances, how are you responding to that?
Okay. Okay. I never really start the conversation on that end because I believe them in themselves are resources in a way. And the input they give is really great. But knowing that they are coming from these circumstances and situations, I mean, yeah, I prefer not to. I don't even prefer to use that word. In fact, I also write again, and I hope this time I'm saying it, about how the kids I teach in CBD are actually more privileged than the kids that are in CARES or Sacred Heart or whatever, mainly because even though they don't have the resources and the access in terms of arts education, they are more resourced because they have imaboneng. So they don't use textbooks. They go to the gallery, we see the works, we discuss, and they reinterpret it in their own way without being structured, So I don't know, quality is always important rather than quantity, and yeah. Gonna see you, bye.
No, we've come to the end.
Just a round of applause to our panelists for their presentation. We have come to the end of this particular session. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We'll resume in the next 10 minutes? 10 minutes, yeah. Thank you.
Can I also have your names in there too, even if it's at the back or whatever?
Guys, there is coffee available outside, so if you need to maybe use the toilets, they're on the second floor, and
I'll get your
coffee is available.